I like the title of the book, A Man Among Them. Sometimes I think about my grandfather and a lot of these older men and the fact that they were very mature. I think about Grandpa Rhodes. That's what I think. So, A Man Among Them. I think that's a really good title of this book about Les Olilla. My interest, starts with our church and Grandpa Rhodes, and so I cheated. I went to that chapter and read about that. That was interesting. How in the book it says that Grandpa Rhodes, Pastor Rhodes, Dr. Rhodes wanted to hire Charlene, and so that's how Les got a job. But as you read the whole context, I think he wanted Les as well as Charlene. Um, I like the story method, using stories to tell the story of Les Olala. That you just get little quips of his life and what happened there, and I think that's really fun and interesting. So first, it starts with the stories from him being a kid and being in humble circumstances near the copper mines of the Keweenaw Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula, and kind of being rough and tumble and being on their own and making their own way and putting together cars out of the junkyard and um, raising chickens in a whole house next door, and just that whole rough environment. Talking about the saunas, how the school they were making their own version of the school play, and they had in the school play there was something about Bathsheba, and they made their own play and called it Sauna Sheba, and just that the culture of was it Finnish? I'm not sure what the culture is. Um, so then he moves with his brother. His brother comes down to the Roseville area, and they are tree toppers, or they work in trimming trees, and so he comes down to make money with his brother, and immediately gets involved in the church. Again, what's interesting to me is I got picked up and taken to church. My grandparents took me to church, and then um, Mrs. Dunsmore took me to church, and then Pastor Dove took me to church, and then Pastor Ratliff took me to church. Well, that happened with him when he was a kid. The Pastor Hart, would go into their little town and pick up him and his brothers, and I think maybe another kid there in town, and bring him to church, and that made a big impact on him. And so there's a picture of Pastor Hart and his wife in the book. He comes down, immediately gets involved with Pastor Rhodes and Calvary Baptist, and it's really interesting. It's fun to hear about how Charlene was so involved with the Rhodes, and that she stayed with the Rhodes when her mom passed away, and she had stayed different places, and then she went to Bob Jones University and would spend her summers with the Rhodes. And so then he kind of gets set up with Charlene while he's there with the Rhodes, and that he was kind of shy, and Grandpa Rhodes told him to pick up Charlene and bring her to a youth activity, and kind of set him up that way. Um, Always he gets praised for being willing to do dirty work. He gets praised for being willing for not being aloof, for being willing to sit down and put his arm around someone who had come to a service at Northland that is a drug addict, and that he's a man of the people. I guess that's how they would say it. But really interesting. I see this principle, this idea in the book. So, Life Action Ministries, there's a heritage with Les Olala and Life Action Ministries, and also the camp that we went to. There's a heritage there, and what I really liked about Artie Parlin, is that he ministered to the 30-year-olds, and the 30-year-olds ministered to the college students, and the college students ministered to the teenagers, and some of the teenagers would minister by coming back to camp and working as op staff and minister to the little kids. And there's this progression like that, and I think I see that he he did that. He did that in his life, and so I don't know how much of that culture he brought, or how much of that culture that he learned from Life Action Ministries, but there is definitely the heritage there. Also, there's this heritage of do your devotions, get in the Bible every day and pray every day, and that's part of the heritage there, and made an impact that people would grow in that environment. The Holy Spirit would have the Bible wherewith to help people to grow, and that made an impact on people. So I like that heritage. So he goes to Bob Jones University because he wants to be involved. He says a monkey could climb these trees and trim these branches. He wants to do something big with his life. Grandpa Rhodes says he needs to go to college, and he's interested in Charlene. Charlene's at Bob Jones, so he and Charlene are at Bob Jones. She's got 2 years ahead of him, but I think she ends up quitting, and he gets his degree from Bob Jones. He comes back to Roseville and just has a reputation. In the book, it says that Grandpa Rhodes said that they'd both go down both sides of the street to try to get people to ride the bus, and Les would get a handful of people signed up to ride the bus in the morning, and Grandpa Rhodes would get nobody. And so he just has this warm personality. In the book, it talks about how they would go to the dump, and they would somehow put on a show pretending like they were bears at the dump. And I don't really understand it, but certainly that it reminded me of George Whitefield, that George Whitefield was an entertainer, and he used his ability to communicate with people and to project his voice and his entertainment background to be to outreach to people. And Les Olilla was able to outreach with people and connect with people, and so on. It just reminded me of George Whitefield in that way. I like this book because it gives me hope that maybe I could write some biographies, because a lot of the references are interviews. The back of the book, it lists all these interviews that she did in preparation for this book. And it's got quotes from my mother-in-law, Sandy, and from her sister about Les Olilla, and just all these quotes from regular people to compile these stories. And it's very interesting, and it gives me hope, like I said, that maybe I could compile these stories, even if I can't get the big picture down that well, which I think the book does include some big picture stuff, and really did enjoy the book. So he goes to Bob Jones, he comes back to Calvary, and at Calvary they're having big vacation Bible schools. They have these layered ministries things. He's always investing in somebody else and encouraging them to invest in other people. And somehow they get this nationwide ministry with Marty Vaughn, I believe it is, and L&M ministry, Les and Marty. But they have kind of a nationwide outreach type thing. And then there's Life Action Ministries. And so they have this nationwide outreach, and so at some point he gets offered this chance to go to Northland and become the president. They have no president at the college, and he gets offered the spot. They call Grandpa Rhodes, and Grandpa Rhodes encourages him to do it. And he's at one point he says it's like putting whipped cream on top of an onion, and so I guess in that scenario he's calling himself the Onion. But he goes to Northland, and I think it's good. The book talks about difficulties, talks about it talks about how much Northland grew when he got there and under his leadership. But it talks about difficult things and circumstances. It talks about how his 17-year-old daughter becomes pregnant, and he thinks, well, that's the end of his ministry. But he gets encouraged, and he's able to have further ministry there, and is encouraged. So at the beginning of the book, it talks about Mr. Patz and how he made his fortune with farm equipment, and that is the foundations of Northland Camp, and then Northland Baptist Bible College, and so I think it's interesting. It tells kind of a summary of his story and kind of ties that in as well. And so, really enjoyed this book. Talked about his ministry and his connection with people, and so I'm really grateful that Judy Coates took the time to compile that and to write it.